Okay, so looks like we've got people joining now. So we'll go ahead and start the webinar. Anyways, for those who are not able to join, we will be sending you a copy of the webinar, and as well as we'll be posting a copy of the webinar in our tutorials uh, videos page. So welcome everybody. My name is Lawrence. I'm from the FileCloud CSM team. And today we will be going through a quick webinar or a discussion on how to create and administer workflows and reports in FileCloud. So basically, we'll be covering how to access reports in FileCloud, reports and workflows in general from the admin portal dashboard, the benefits of using workflows and reports, and how you could invoke a report using a workflow in FileCloud. So to start with, you will need to grant a user, you will need to promote a user to an admin role, and you will need to grant the admin or to add the admin user to a role that would have access to reports and workflows. So generally, you may have to initially log in as the admin user, promote the user that needs to access the reports and workflows. Then you could create the role, add the admin user, the newly promoted admin user to the role so that the user can access workflows and reports. Shortly, I'll show you a quick demo on that one. So this is how it looks like. You log into the admin portal. These are the reports, or these are the roles that you will need to enable for the reports admin. And I'll go through a quick demo on that one later on. So what is workflow and what is reports in FileCloud? Workflows, generally administrators can use workflows to automate certain standard operations within FileCloud. So we do have a list of predefined conditions for workflows that you could use and you could utilize as an admin for your FileCloud system. For reports, it gives administrators the ability to extract data from your FileCloud system for basically monitoring and analytics. You could have it in a form of a graph or CSV format, or just pull it out of the admin portal interface. So let's go through a quick demo here. So initially, I'm going to log into the FileCloud system as the main admin user. You will have this user when you initially sign up for FileCloud trial. You will be using this user to initially set up your FileCloud system for all the folder structure and the users and the privileges. So right now, I'm going to show you that I do have a few admin users. So I have this username, or I have the user Clark and Tony as my admin users. Now I'm going to go into the admin's view. This is the new interface that you're looking at right now. I'm going to create a role that would grant these two admin users access to reports and workflow. But before that one, I wanted to show you how it looks like when they would log in. So both of the users are already admin users. I'm going to log in as Tony here. And notice that when I log into the admin portal as Tony with no roles being assigned, I only get this information from the admin portal. You may notice this one with the new version of FileCloud. So I'm going to log out and I'm going to go back to the main admin user. So I could create the appropriate role. So I'll go back to admin and I'll go ahead and create a role. I'll name this role reports admin. But generally, this will be the role that could access reports and as well as workflow. So I'm going to search for reports over here from the set of permissions, and I'm going to give this user full privilege for reports and as well as full privilege for workflow, or full access for workflow. Once the role is created, or once the permissions have been set, I could go ahead and go into users, or first create the role. go into the users tab. What you see here on the list will be the set of admin users that you've promoted. So I could select Clark here, move it to the right side, select Tony, move it to the right side, and go ahead and click close. So now we have the role set up. So you have the reports admin role created, and we've got 2 admin users added. I'm going to sign out of the admin portal, and I'm going to log in as one of those users to the admin portal. So you notice here that Tony here, this admin user Tony, now has workflows and reports. So let's go ahead and navigate through reports and workflows. So in reports here, this is the reports page that an admin user that's added to the role can see. You have the report name, just a snippet of the query. You have actions here to run the workflow or run the report. You could edit the report from here. You could ultimately delete the report as well. If you needed to, you could add a report, and this is the add button here. So in workflows, what you could see here is basically just an overview of your existing workflow. You've got your workflow name, the condition, what action needs to be implemented for this condition or to be run with this for this condition. You could see the last time that the workflow had ran and the last action. So also, what you could do with a workflow from this view is that you could enable a workflow. You could also disable a workflow from here. You could run the workflow on demand using the green button. The other play button is basically to simulate the workflow. So you could simulate the workflow to see the data being returned. Say, for example, the second report that I have here. So I could see that these are the documents that I will be moving for deletion. So basically, it returns the data, but will not implement the action. You could also edit the workflow from here using the edit button. You could also see the workflow history, what had happened when the last time it had ran, and ultimately delete the workflow from here. And you also have the add workflow button, which we will be going over later on. So first, I'll start with reports. So in here, I do have a couple of reports that I've already created. I do have a report called Get Files with a US Social Security number and what the query is. So let's go ahead and examine the report. If you go ahead and click and edit, you can see that I've indicated a report name. And you can see here that this is the query that I've applied for this report, and these are the parameters that it's using. So it's easier to actually click and add report in here and show you how I created the workflow that I've showed you. So from here, we have in FileCloud, we have a set of CAD reports that you could supply parameters to. So you could get your intended outcome or output. So from here, we have a list of reports that you could use. We do have a support documentation that I could show you here. So this is the existing documentation that we have off of the support website. You can see a definition of each of the reports that's listed from the admin portal here. So in this case, I'm going to get a report for file shares. So say, for example, I could go into user shares. There's also another option here for, what was it? Get shares report. So I'll do that one. Once you click on next, you will be asked to enter a parameter for the report. Some of the parameters are required, some of the parameters are optional. Say, for example, for this report that I'm showing you right now, most of the parameters are actually optional. And if you do not enter a parameter for this report, it defaults to return data for the last 7 days. So I'm going to leave it as it is right now because I wanted to return data for the last 7 days. And I also don't want to specify a user that needs or for the specific data. So I'll go ahead and click next. And from here, I could add a report name. From there, and I could go ahead and click on finish. So from there, I could run the report on demand, and it should be able to return data for the specific or captured for the specific report. So from here, you're seeing that these are the default fields that gets returned for that report. So you've got the timestamp, you've got the username, what application or FileCloud client application it's being was used to create the share. So most of it are web browser, but it could also occur for FileCloud Sync, FileCloud Drive, the mobile applications, and as well as the Microsoft Outlook and the Office add-ins. And you can see the IP address of the user sharing and the user or the information for the share. So you can see the path where the file is being shared from. So some of the rules that I've created here, let's go ahead and dissect some of them. So I've got a rule here called get Dlp Rule Violation. So if you're familiar with data leak prevention, and if you're an admin, you wanted to find out if there are any attempts to try and share a file or download a file where it wasn't supposed to. So let's go ahead and examine that one. I'll go ahead and click edit. So what I have here is basically I do have a report. The query that I use is get statistics about DLP violations. And I supplied here a parameter, but this is also optional. If you want to return all violations for all your DLP rules, you can do that one. But what I have here is I've specified a rule or a DLP rule, which is called prevent download for files containing US Social Security number. And I'm doing last 15 minutes violation for it. So I could, this is what I did for that report, and I could run the report right now. And this is what's getting returned. So by the way, this is what I was saying earlier, that you could generate the report and see it from the interface, but you could also download the report into a CSV file. Just like so. And then let's go through some of the other reports that I've created. So I've got user storage quota, user storage report. I also got client application information. So let's go over that one really quick. So for user quota is basically, it will return information that you will be getting from the dashboard about how much storage is being allocated for a user, how much storage they're currently using. So this is the user quota. Another one is the application information. So if users are logging in from which client, that will return the information. So if we try and run the report right here, we can see my username, where it's currently logging in from. I've got FileCloud Drive showing up, Cloud Sync. I also have the Outlook add-in. You can see the version of the operating system. And also you've got, well, the API level as well. You could also see the timestamp and some other information. Also, aside from being able to run the report from here, from the reports page, you should be able to get reports from here, from the dashboard. Right now, I'm also going to log in. From the dashboard, you could see statistics, which I usually cover for admin training. So from statistics, you can see a summary of the list of your users. So you have your full, your guest, and your limited access users. You've got a total number of groups that's currently on your system, your My Files, the list of your network folders, how many shares has been created in the system, how many devices had tried to connect to the system or had connected, your audit records here, and email sent for the last 10 hours. Aside from that, if I signed out and go back to the main admin portal, or log in as the main admin account, I could also see other reports such as traffic, network traffic, or requests from your clients. You could also see license information here. This is what we call dashboard reports. So you can see license information, how much license you currently have and how much is being used, the expiration date. You could also see your version. And if your server is connected to the internet, it also gives you a value for the latest version and if an update is available. And from here, you can see file distribution and user file distribution reports. So how much of the file that's currently in your system is which file type is it, and how much file is assigned is currently under which user. And then on the bottom here, you see client devices that's being connected. This is the graph that I was talking about earlier. And of course, you see user quota. So some of the reports you can generate from the reports page. Some of them you can just get off of the admin portal dashboard. So now I'm going to go and log back in with the other user that we promoted for the admin role or for the reports role. And from here, I've shown you reports and some of the functions for reports. I've shown you how to create one, just a basic creation of the report. Now let's go into workflow. So what can you do in the workflow page? So like I said earlier, FileCloud or in FileCloud, the existing workflow function that we have is basically a set of conditions where we could generate, where we could actually automate an action. So some of the functions that you have here is that you can see the workflow name, the condition, and the action that will be performed for that condition, as I've mentioned earlier. Let's go ahead and add a workflow here. Or I do have two that I've already created. One is basically setting a policy for a newly created limited access user. Let's go ahead and examine that one here. So I've clicked the edit button there, and you can see that I have a few parameters set up. So my condition is that if a new user is created with these values, so if it's using the default authentication, so not logged in from AD or LDAP, also what access that the user has, so it's a limited access user, and what method it's using, if it's SSO or just a default, so I'm just using any. And then the action that I'm performing for this, for the parameters above, is set user policy, and I'm setting the policy name. So I do have a policy that I've already created called limited users, and I'm setting that user, that newly created limited access user, to this policy. So that will automate your process for you. You don't have to manually add the user to the policy or add the user to the group. I have another one here to move files that are inactive for deletion. So my condition here is that if a file was not modified, so that's one thing that we could actually, in order to for us to identify if a file has been inactive, is that we could try and look into the modified date. So if a file has not been modified and I have a specific value here, you could actually do a bigger value. You could do a 30-day, maybe a year perhaps. And I've also indicated a path. Later on, it looks easier if we click on add workflow. Another parameter that I've supplied here would be skip recently accessed. So if a file was accessed within 15 days, it will skip it from the data that it's or it will basically skip it. And the action is move the files to some location. So this is the location that I've indicated, which is the for deletion folder, and I'm allowing override. So let's go ahead and click on add workflow just so we could see the rest of the conditions that we have. So we have, and as I mentioned earlier, so we do have a list here, and we also do have a support documentation available in our website that would give you a list of workflows, condition, or what are the conditions that you could run. And that is going to be here. Define if condition, and you'll see the list. And you have definitions as well. So if later on, we're also going to send you guys an email with including these links that is off of our support website. So from here, I could see the drop down and I could see the list. What I usually do, the easiest that I could create is if a user, or let's say, for example, you guys are utilizing limited access users, and down the road, this number of limited access users may grow in numbers. and you wanted to identify which users are inactive and which users are not. So what you could do is that you could click on if a user's last login is older than, and then you go ahead and click next. So the parameters that you'll be entering here is actually just down below. Same goes for reports. Um, you could just basically copy the sample from this window and then change the values in the parameters. So say, for example, if I wanted to delete users, inactive users that are older than maybe 365 days, so that will be a year. And we've got an interval here. The interval is basically the frequency of when the workflow will run. And this is in days. So I'm going to leave it with a default value, which is 5. So every 5 days, my workflow will run. And what type of user account is it going to be looking into? So I'm going to copy this value right here. So some of the values are also supplied for you from this window. So you could just copy it and change the value in the parameter. So if I do that one, basically what it means is that for limited access users that have not logged in for the last 365 days, every 5 days it's going to run and would look for these types of users. Next is that what action are we going to implement, or we're going to kick out or trigger for this for the parameters. So I could basically run a report. I could execute a command. I could notify the user that an account may be deactivated. So if you want to send them an email, you could disable the user account. You could ultimately delete it if you know limited access users actually do not have files assigned to them because they are unlicensed account. So you could just delete them. You could, if you want, you could change the status. You could generate an email report if you wanted to. Set a policy, but what I would usually do here for this example is delete a user account. And there's a second set of parameters that you might need to supply. This is basically the admin's email address. So basically, if you put an email address here, the email address will be receiving a report about the workflow. And there's another parameter that says do not email user. This is currently set to 0, which means that users will not be notified that their account will be deleted. But if you want to notify them, you can basically set this to 1. And then you could go ahead and click next. Name a workflow, maybe delete users, limited access users older than. I'm going to do 365 days. Just like so. And then I could go ahead and click on finish. And from here, remember that we do have an interval for the parameter that we've set earlier. So aside from the interval, you could actually run the report on demand. So instead of waiting for the 5 days interval, you could run the report. You could also simulate the report. So I don't have anything that's actually older than 365 days in here for a limited access user, but you could do that. You could edit, see the workflow history from here, and ultimately delete the workflow. So another example that I'm going to show you right now is I'm going to try and trigger a workflow or a report from a workflow. So let's say, for example, let's do this. I do have an example here that I want to show you guys. Give me a moment. Okay, so I wanted to do a run a workflow periodically. So I do have that option here. So you have the perform an action periodically at a specific time interval, perform an action on a specific date if you want to, or a specified date, perform an action periodically as well. But what I'm going to use right now is perform an action at a specified time and interval. This is because I could actually put in a specific time on when the workflow would run, and I could indicate an interval. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy that. And then I could set the value here to be 1200 hours. So that will be all zeros. And every 7 days, I could do that one. I could run the report, or I could run the report every 30 days if I wanted to, and go ahead and click next. So in this, for the action, if you notice, The actions are actually lesser than from earlier. So depending on what condition you will be putting in for the report, the actions will also change. Right now, I'm going to set it to run a report, and then I will copy the sample parameter over here, indicate my report. So I've got a report called get user storage report. That's what I created from earlier. And then I could indicate here an email address where the report will be sent. So I could indicate here my email address. So for now, I'm not actually going to use a dummy email. So I won't actually get an email from here, but it will show up, and then we'll just check on the audit logs later on. So I've got my email, and then I could go ahead and click next and get reports for weekly. Since I've placed it to 7 days, so it's going to be a weekly report for user storage. So once that one is done, you have your report, and you have your workflow, and this workflow will basically run a report. The requirement is that you would have to have an existing report that you will be running for this workflow. So if I go back to reports here, I do have that workflow set up already, get user storage report. And when the workflow is triggered every 7 days on 12 midnight, it will basically run the get storage quota report. Okay, so far, and remember that we're actually not limited to just the reports and the workflows that I've shown you guys. We do have a list of existing reports and canned reports and conditions and workflow conditions that you could play around with. Like I said, we're going to send you a link to our support documentation so you could explore it further. So far, do we have any questions? If anyone have any more questions, you can place it in the Q&A portion of our Zoom meeting. I'll wait for a few minutes more. So we have a question here from Manuel. Could we have a deepening and a practice example on how to use the placeholders in workflow? Are you referring to the parameters that I've shown earlier? Okay, let's go over some of the parameters that we have covered from earlier. So from the sample that we have, let's go over for deletion over here. So this is one of the workflows that I've already created. And from here, from the parameters that you have, aside from being able to get example parameters, when you go ahead and click next, let's get another one here. Say if a file has been downloaded. So you have example parameters that you could use, and you also have explanations or descriptions that you also have descriptions on what these parameters are. And give me a moment. Okay, here. So let's go through the drop down for the conditions. So basically, I'll go through some of the conditions, the common ones that that will be used or that's being used. So from here, we've got if a new client app connects. So this is basically the client application. So if I'm using or if the user is using like FileCloud Sync, FileCloud Drive, or from the web application, if a new client connects, you can, this is the condition and you can indicate what happens next, or what's the action that you could actually implement. So if you want to block, so this, for example, if a new client or if I've got a user that's connecting for the first time from their Android device or Apple device, I could notify the user for something, or I could block the user and would require admin approval. So let's go for another example here. Say we've got, if a folder is created, so basically if there's a new folder that was created in your file structure. So say, for example, this is the parent folder path. I would usually put in here, like say, for example, if the folder has been created from the team folder account. So I would put in here master. So this is my team folder account. I could put in there master, and basically if a new folder is being created from from any location of my team folder, I could then implement an action here. I could copy the file to a different location, delete the files, verify its integrity, or even run a report for that specific action. Another one that we could look into here is that if a file has not been shared or accessed for the last specified days, and this is based on last access information or last access date. And you have this one here. So you could you could specify a parent folder, and there are some parameters that you could also look into here. Any more questions so far? By the way, what I've covered are just the most commonly used reports um, based on experience. And but however, you could always explore the support documentations that we will be including later on in an email to give you an idea on the rest of the existing reports and workflows that we have. Okay, so it looks like this will be the end of our webinar for today. Um, in the future, we will be uploading a copy of this webinar in our tutorials website. So this is FileCloud or getfilecloud.com/FileCloud/tutorials/videos. You could also open up a support ticket with our support team at support at or by sending an email to support@codelathe.com, and also visit our support documentations at getfilecloud.com/support docs. And again, I want to thank everyone for joining today's webinar, and you have a wonderful day.